We're going to talk about finding the midpoint of a segment. So we're going to go ahead and just define a couple of things first. So the midpoint is we can just basically say it's the middle point of the segment. So it's the point where on either side of that point are two congruent segments. So if we wanted to draw a diagram, if this point A was the midpoint of BD, then AB and AD are congruent. Okay, so just like before when we were finding the midpoint on a number line, we're essentially just finding an average point, okay? But now our lines are going to be slanted. They're not going to be either a perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal line that we can put on the number line. So the way we're going to do this is still finding averages. We're first going to average our X value, and then we're going to average our Y value. And remember, when we're averaging but with two numbers, we're just going to be dividing by 2. Okay. So let me draw you a picture of kind of what's happening here, just so we can visualize it. So we have some segment, it's probably going to be a slanted segment, and we want to find the midpoint of this segment. So what we're first going to do is we're going to find the midpoint of our vertical segment, right? So remember, when we're finding an average, we actually add, right? So we're going to add our two Y values, and then we're going to average them to find what's right in the middle. So we're going to find that first midpoint, the midpoint of the Y values. So sometimes you can call this YM or however you want to denote that. You don't really need to though. And then we're going to do the same thing, but for the horizontal distance here, we can think of it as a leg. This time I'm going to average my x's. I'm going to take the sum of my x values, divide by 2. That'll give me this midpoint. Okay, now we're going to bring them together, and combined, they're going to give me the midpoint of the whole segment, right? The overall segment that we were looking for. So this is what then creates our midpoint formula. So essentially, this midpoint has an x coordinate from this horizontal part and a y coordinate from this vertical part. And this is exactly our midpoint formula. Go ahead and formalize that on this next page, our midpoint formula. So we get our x coordinate by averaging our x values. We get our y coordinate by averaging our y values. Okay, so let's put this to use. Let's put it to work. So we're just going to plug right into the formula. So our midpoint is going to be the average of our x's, so -2 plus 4 divided by 2. And then our y value is going to be the average of our y's, so 4 plus a -8 divided by 2. And then we just want to simplify, right? So this point, we would have -2 plus 4 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. 4 plus a -8 is a -4, divided by 2 is a -2. And that's the midpoint of those two segments. Okay. We'll do one more. So again, plugging into the formula, just very carefully, remember that your first two values in these points are your x's, right? So 1 and -4 are your x values, and then the second value in each point, so 7 and 3, those are your y values. Okay, so we should have the sum of the x's, which is 1 plus a -4 divided by 2, and then the average of the y's, we take their sum, 7 plus 3, and then divide by 2, and then we just want to simplify, right? So always simplify, don't leave anything unsimplified here. So we would have 2 and 3 halves as our point. Okay, Now you can also do this by using a graph. So we kind of drew out our little triangle before and looked at the midpoint in that way, right? It's because it's the midpoint, it's the combination of the midpoint of the vertical and the horizontal pieces if we made a triangle. So if we're on a coordinate plane and our sides are kind of integer values, right? They line up perfectly with the grid, we can find our midpoint that way. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to kind of locate our midpoint of each of these pieces of our triangle. So this is 3 units from either side there, so that's my midpoint. And we'll go ahead and find my other midpoint. Let's just verify that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, so that's not quite it. Need to go one more further in. So be about here, right? So that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units from the one side, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units from the other side. So you just want to make it even. Then we're going to combine those together onto our slanted segment to find our midpoint. So that has a x coordinate of 0 and a y coordinate of 1, and there's our midpoint. If you prefer to use the formula and you're given a graph, you still absolutely can use the formula. You just simply want to pull your 2 points off of your graph. So this would be the point 3, 4, 5, -6, 5. And this would be the point 2, -6. And then you can substitute into the formula from there. The times you might want to substitute into the formula are if we draw our triangle and we're going to get a fraction of some sort. So this vertical length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 units long. So if I'm looking for the midpoint, it's actually right here. So it's not going to give me a really nice midpoint, which tells me because I can't approximate that very well, I want to use my formula instead of counting on a graph. So I'm going to plug this into my formula real quick to get a nice midpoint. So we're going to have -6 plus 2 divided by 2, 5 plus -6 divided by 2. So our midpoint here would be -4 and 1/2. -1/2 would be our midpoint. Okay. So whenever we get a fraction or we're going to get a decimal, it's just nicer to use the formula so that we get an exact value.